Hello, and thank you for joining today's presentation. This is presented for the Sitecore user group based in Portland, but is information relevant to really any content management system user across the globe. Acting locally, succeeding globally is the title for today's presentation, and our hope is that will help you understand some best practices you can follow to help you go global in kind of a more efficient way. First, just a bit of context. Translations.com, we've been in business now for over 20 years, and ultimately through that time, through that length of experience, we've learned a great deal from our customers about how to go global. In fact, this might surprise you, but some of the world's largest brands who often translate their content into other languages don't actually use their own people on staff to do that work. They typically outsource that work to companies like us. Ultimately, right now, we're the world's largest privately held language services provider. So that means that we can pull on some experience that we hope will be valuable to you through the course of the presentation. In case it's not already clear to you, there is definitely a major opportunity in going global. As you can see here, the U.S. Department of Commerce is making it very clear that 73% of online shoppers today do not speak English. They're non-English speakers. And to take that even further, in Europe, Forrester ran a research project that ended up concluding that close to 50% of online users never shop online in any language other than their own. The point here is that what you have is an audience that is looking for content in their own language. In fact, it's a very, very large audience. This means that there's a great opportunity from an e-commerce standpoint, but also from a competitive standpoint. If your competition are not global, then it's time for you to consider that if you enter that market first, you can capture that market and capture it faster than anyone. Alternatively, if your competition are already in market, then you're at a severe disadvantage by not competing against them in those marketplaces. So the business case here for offering multilingual content, whether it's Spanish in the US, Canadian French, German, Chinese, Japanese, whatever the language might be, the opportunity and the value is there. So let's say you've decided to go global. You've agreed that it's time to, by going global, offer multilingual content to customers, whether it's marketing communications, or in some cases, if you have infrastructure in those countries, you have to have content in language available to your employees. So you decide to go global, and first you think, okay, well, I've got to get my website translated. So let's go have a translation company give us a quote, or a contractor. Let's find out what it costs to translate. And they come back with an estimate. Let's say it's $50,000. They come back, you look at that, you take it to your management, you get approval. The truth is, though, that the translation cost is not the only cost. So there's this myth out there that localization is all about the content. What we'd like to say is that it's actually more kind of about the content, kind of sort of about the content, not actually all about the content. And what we're trying to say by that is, let's say you're a marketing manager. You have a budget. This dollar represents your budget. And we're sorry for those of you who are listening in from other countries. We wanted to use kind of this lowest common denominator, and in fact, it's the only graphic I could find. I grabbed it from my wallet. But we're using $1 for today's purposes, but this is your budget. The translation cost represents, in fact, perhaps a quarter of your cost to offer a multilingual website. The rest of the costs tend to boil down into your internal costs. And put another way, if this is the iceberg that is to go global, roughly 80% of that, or 3/4 of that, is what's below the waterline. The translation process is what we're alluding to here. And this might come as a surprise. A lot of folks say, okay, well, isn't it simple just to get a website translated? The truth of the matter is that it can be actually quite complex for a number of reasons, which we'll go through today in order to try to help you plan properly for going global. Throughout the presentation, you're going to notice here that we include quotes from our clients, some of the clients that we've helped go global, some of the clients of ours that are spending a lot of money today to offer content in other languages, but also clients who have, along the way, through their experience, gone through a number of challenges even. Not with us necessarily, just challenges in general from doing business globally. So Merck here is saying, determine that right balance, the one that works for your team in IT, the balance with your local markets, your strategy, and the tasks at hand for translation. Try to figure all of that out and find that balance, and then determine your approach before you go global. Try to plan beforehand, and that's a message you're going to see repeated here in a couple of the quotes that we have from customers. So what's the big challenge? What's the thing that causes so much trouble for folks when they try to go global? Let's say you're a marketing manager. We have translations.com's website here, just a screen cap. We're going to go ahead and translate this site. And so I'm a marketing manager, and I'm thinking, okay, I need, I don't know, 5 languages. I want 5 different versions of my website. This should be simple. I just get a quote for translation. Life will be good. We'll move on. We'll get it translated. Things will be good. But the thing that folks don't often realize is that your website is built from many pieces. And not only is it built from many pieces, but it interacts with many other pieces. It could be a situation where you have email automation configured on your website. And because of email automation, you have another system where you store content for email templates that get automatically kicked to folks that visit your website, those folks that complete some kind of action on your site, whether it's registering, filling a cart, going through a transaction and closing, and billing on a project or billing on a purchase. That's just one example. You'll have repositories for product information. You'll have databases. You'll have other repositories like a DAM for digital assets. You'll have multimedia in another place. You might have chat. All of these tools get plugged into your site. All of them contain content that needs to be translated. So this concept of simply translating your website, then the real question becomes, oh, geez, where do we have content? It's not as simple as an export. Oh, wait, it is as simple as an export, but hang on, we've got to export content from each of these places. How do we do this? What do we do? Where do we start? So the other side of this, too, that you have to be thinking about is, okay, let's agree to do an export and an import. What are the challenges with that? Let's just talk about that for a moment. If you run an export on content, it's usually sent in some form of XML or XLIF for translation. That export then has to be imported back in after that translation occurs. If you offer content in as many as an example, 5 languages, then you're creating 5 different exports. Or, more accurately, when you need to import that content, you have 5 different files that you're importing. Each of those files is full of strings of content that then get translated. And when that content gets imported back into your website, the other tricky part is the QA and testing. How do you ensure that that site says what you want it to say? If the strings have been sent as an export, just literally a long list of strings of content that need to be translated, then they may not have been in the file with any kind of context, which means you have to check the pages to make sure that when they're assembled, they're saying the right message. You have to QA that site, test it. Beyond all of that, another thing that is often overlooked is that when you import that content, for many languages, mostly Western European languages, Latin-based languages, Romance languages, what you'll see is that the text expands 20 to 40%. So if the text expands that much, let's just think about what that means. Let's say you have a navigation, a nicely designed site. Everything is in its right place. It's orderly. Then you translate the copy and it's 40% longer. Then your templates will look different, right? Different might not be bad, but most of the things that we've seen with our clients is that it leads to issues with truncation, text being cut off, text going down on another row where there's no space, text that's not displaying the way you had originally intended. So if you're designing a website, make sure then that you're allowing for the expansion of text so that you can plan for longer term that localization, that translation process. Even if you're doing an import and an export, that's not a perfect process. Plus, frankly, if you have content in multiple places, let's go back here. You have all of these different elements that contain copy that need to be translated. If you're going to have each of those translated, that's multiple feeds of content that need to be exported, that then become even more feeds of content that need to be imported. So the process can be actually quite difficult, quite complicated, quite time-consuming. And then beyond that, because it's not a automated process, it's not a refined process, you have to check it, you have to review it. And you can try to stymie some of that requirement by designing the sites beforehand so that you can eliminate some of the challenge around going global. Let's say you've gone global, and then the other tricky part that a lot of folks don't think about is your ongoing translation. Let's say you have an e-commerce site or even a B2B site, and you use the website as a repository for information about your products or your services. That content is changing often multiple times in a month. It could be even multiple times in a week. So then you have to determine how frequently do we need to update this site. Beyond that even, what's your right balance between having people in market author and control content and then having core content that's controlled centrally? You need to try to define what that difference is. Where do you stop? How much of the content is core? How much do you give control to people in market? But then beyond that, if it's needing to be updated on an ongoing basis, what's your process for that update? How are you getting all of those different repositories exported and imported back in on an ongoing basis? Not to mention, once you export them out, the translation process takes time. It could take a week, it could take 2 weeks. If you have a release cycle that is set once a month, and you do an export, and then it takes 2 weeks to translate, and then you have to wait to have it imported back in based on your cycle, and then you have more updates, you're suddenly having a website that is out of date, maybe not compliant even. Things to think about around maintenance, things to think about in terms of the process. If you have 6 repositories, you export those for translation into 4 languages, you're going to have 24 different files that need to be imported back in. 24 different files changed twice a week ends up being 48 different import processes that are happening in a week. Multiply that out and you can fathom how much time, how much money, how much effort it takes. And then beyond that, exporting and importing is not a simple task either. It can be fraught with risk. It's a manual process. Anytime there's a human process, of course there's going to be some possibility that there's a risk or a challenge. So those imports could go awry. You add that to the burden of the amount of work that has to be done, and you're talking about needing people that are dedicated to just this process of managing the site and getting it translated, and possibly many people on an ongoing basis. The overhead. This is what we're talking about when we're saying 75, 80% of the costs are from the process, your hard costs, your internal costs. So the way that you can eliminate that is by incorporating a platform that can connect to your back-end systems, a platform that can be set and set up centrally so that users across the business, whether they're in marketing or HR or legal, all of these different users who need translation can access that same system. But beyond that, your team that's responsible for your Sitecore implementation, your team that's responsible for your e-commerce engine, your other databases that might store content, that group that's responsible for putting that website in 5 languages has now a tool that's integrated into the back end that creates a workflow for sending content out for translation. The beauty of it is you can have vendors translate, you can have translations.com translate. Really, any resource that you choose can do that translation work for you. But the beauty of it is when the translations are completed, each sentence, those get stored into a database named a translation memory. The beauty of it is the way the technology works is that as a person translates, they're told that they have a phrase already in the memory, in that database. And they're prompted to reuse that phrase. With many of our clients today, 60, even as much as 80% of their content is repeated content, content coming from that repository. We even just launched recently or announced the publishing of a report that Forrester did, where Forrester found that one of our clients saved over $7 million by using this kind of technology. That's a client who's eliminating much of those internal costs, many of the costs that are associated with translation. And they're doing it by using this kind of technology where they're storing and reusing phrases centrally. Those phrases are available then to all of their resources. They're controlling terminology, which allows them then to control their branding and how they're communicating. But then beyond all of this, we're making the process more simple. We're making the whole thing more simple. The idea is to make it simple, make it faster, make it cost less, so that this becomes then more scalable for you to enter more markets and find new customers and make new money. So just another quote here, looking at Hilton. Launching a new site carries fixed costs for development and even for translations. It's the ongoing maintenance of those same sites that will carry variable costs. It could be ongoing development, ongoing translation. What they're saying here is take a look and really try to define what those variables are and how you can control them. Some of our clients, as an example, they'll look at their content. They'll set a prioritization around the content. They'll deem that certain content needs to be optimized with an SEO approach. Other content needs to just have a standard localization to it. Advertising content requires some level of transcreation. And then even other content can go through machine translation with a human edit. So defining content priorities and then assigning to those the appropriate form of translation allows you to optimize your budget. It's not only your initial budget, but of course the ongoing maintenance. If you're processing some content using a less expensive method for translation, then of course on an ongoing basis you're going to reap many rewards, a great deal of savings. Tie that to technology that helps you automate some of the process and then reuse strings, and you find yourself then with a global website that was easy to launch, didn't cost you nearly as much as you had expected, and is now earning you money, so much so to the point where you're able to go into new markets. So just other things to consider. In this omni-channel world, folks, of course, are looking at having responsive designs to their website, having mobile apps, determining if they go with a mobile site or a mobile app or both. There are content management systems that now allow you to take content from your core website and then port that into mobile apps. And the truth of the matter is you need to pay close attention to, in this case, the content. How is that content being displayed? What devices does it work in? How does it look for the user? What is their experience? What's available to them with their mobile device? Where do we put access to the mobile app? Which marketplace is the most successful in a given market? If you're looking at SEO or SEM, which search engine is used in market? The algorithms are different by search engine. In Russia, it's Yandex. In China, it's Baidu. As you go down the list in each market, you'll find that even in some markets, Bing is the search engine that has the majority of the market share. When you do SEO on a multilingual basis, you can't simply localize your English or source language SEO. You have to do it properly in language. We have processes that can address that. The whole point here is you need to be thinking about this. Think about mobile. Think about SEO, SEM. If you have an e-commerce website, think about your pricing strategy. Is converting your pricing sufficient? Will you be competitive in market if you simply use a conversion? What about logistics and shipping? Which resources can you use to assist with making sure that your customers get the products that they are purchasing, or the services even for that matter? In some markets, how is payment processing handled? Do they use credit cards even? In some markets even, I think there's a recent report talking about in China how it's very common and expected to offer cash on delivery, COD, as a form of payment. And not only that, but to take that even a step further, those retailers not offering COD as a form of payment were not ranked as highly, because when discovering that that COD is not offered on their e-tail or retail sites, consumers would leave those sites. Google tracks that information and incorporates that into their rankings. Baidu, if it's China specifically, actually incorporates that into their rankings. And what you have then is something that got overlooked because you weren't local. So the summary here is plan for going global early. Think about the non-translation-related dependencies. Think through how you can make the process more efficient. Prioritize your content. How can you use technology to make it more scalable? Define your strategy. Pay close attention to the type of translation that you're using. Quality is still important, but you can prioritize which pages you emphasize placing greater quality and paying for that as well. I'd like to leave here then with just one last quote from Deba Mins. Think end-to-end about what you're going to do, but do it from the customer's point of view. So you have to have either someone in market to give you that perspective, or you need to be thoughtful enough to go out to that site, experience it as if you're someone from that marketplace. Look for things that might not make sense. Is the form localized? Does the form that I fill out have city, state, zip code? Well, we don't have that structure in my country. I can't even use your website because your form isn't relevant to my marketplace. Think about that. Currency, pricing, SEO, mobile. You have to pay as much attention to these multilingual sites as you do your English. But don't spend all of your time and focus and energy on the process. Leverage technology to streamline that. Focus on the strategy and the content, and you can make a more scalable solution. You can become more successful. If you want to continue the conversation, if you have more questions, feel free to reach out to me anytime. You can also continue the conversation on the Sitecore Portland user group. the website there that's posted on the meetup. Feel free to reach out anytime. No question is a bad question, and we'd certainly love to be able to help you out. So that said, thank you for your time today.